Welcome everyone to a new exciting series. So what we're going to do now is, just a moment, okay, fine. What we're going to do now is we're going to do topics in Tanakh, topics in Bible, and we're going to start with topics in prophecy. So in this class, what I'd like to do is kind of give you a quick overview of the sort of things we're going to look at in relation to prophecy, and also talk a little, and then kind of dive in. All right. So in general, when we're let me make sure that my connection is with the right. It should be an okay connection. Okay. So what we're going to start with when what we're going to start with today really is like, what is prophecy? I mean, there's actually kind of a range when we talk about prophecy. On the one hand, and this we're going to look at today, prophecy is kind of contrasted with magic, right? That's what makes prophecy prophecy. It's not magic. On the other hand, there's kind of a range with prophecy in terms of doing these kind of miraculous actions or predicting the future. And then when we get to the end of prophecy, there is this concept of continuing revelation, right? Despite the fact that prophecy is supposed to end. So we're going to see how that's handled when we get kind of towards the end of this particular series. Now, again, I'm not expecting prophecy to necessarily take all year. This is going to be the first one, but there are a lot of different things to explore when it comes to prophecy. So we're going to be looking at the role of the prophet. We're going to start today with just looking at kind of very briefly what it says about Moshe, just in terms of his role as the continuing role of prophets, and then the idea of what is the job of a prophet. Now, when we look at what the job is of a prophet, I'm very much not, my approach personally is much more it's more trees and less forest. So I am going to look at how different prophets kind of depicted their role, right? So, and we can kind of learn a little bit about how, for example, Amos saw his role, or what Amos says about the role of the prophet, what Cheskel says about the role of the prophet. One key piece of what we call the book prophets is this idea that you can't stay quiet. That this is not going to do you any good to say a prophecy. It's not going to help you. But you just can't stay quiet if God speaks to you. But another, which is contrasting, of course, with the guild of prophets. We have, starting from, as long as there are kings, you have kings' prophets. If you believe in prophecy as a king, it's a smart thing to have a prophet. And if you're a prophet, it can be smart to be a king, right? So you have this kind of guild of prophet. They're supported. The idea is that they're supported by the royal house, or perhaps by gifts that people bring. They want prophecies. They want to know what's going to happen. And most of our book prophets are in contrast to that guild of prophets, who are in themselves kind of a power class. For example, towards the end of Bairishon, towards the end of the First Temple period, the prophets themselves are this kind of power group within Jerusalem, right? You have they can kind of, and there's an issue there. This is not, the idea that a king has a prophet is not unique. If those of you who joined me for ancient Near East, when we looked at prophecy, saw that outside of Israel, we also have stories not only of prophets who, of course, belong to the royal house, but prophets telling kings, don't do that, it's stupid, right? Don't do that, you're gonna get everyone in trouble. And we even have a case where the prophets are right and the king is disastrously wrong. But of course, the king did what he wanted to do, and everyone suffered, and outside of Judah and Israel. So we know that this is not the only place where you have a prophet who disagrees with the king, probably not to the extent that Yirmiyahu does or is willing to take it. Like it doesn't seem like these prophets were imprisoned in any way. The other prophets that I'm talking about, that they warned the king against a treaty with Elam. They're like, you can't trust them. They're just going to betray you. and the prophets are right. He turns right around and betrays him. But I don't think anything, it doesn't seem like anything happens to them. Of course, when we leave Israel, when we live in Israel and Yehuda, and we go out to the outside world, we're naturally not going to find many prophets who aren't part of the royal something, because someone had to write their stuff down to record it and keep it. And that's another thing that we're going to discuss when it comes to prophets, is that these are considered important enough to write down and to keep and to pass on from generation to generation, even in certain cases when some of these prophecies don't come true. And that's also an interesting point. We have prophecies from Yirmiyahu and from Yechezkel that don't come true, right? And yet they're not thrown out. We have a prophecy from Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu says, that's it. There won't be, he says, like Noah, right? We read it in the Haftorah. Like there's not going to be another flood, there's not going to be another destruction, right? Now he says this in after Beit Rishon, right? Now it's what you call second Isaiah, right? Yeshayahu Sheni. So wherever you put it, but it's still before the destruction of the second temple, no matter what. And he's saying there's not going to be another destruction, right? So we don't throw him out. Okay, so that's also another aspect, interesting aspect of prophecy. We're going to look a little bit at the legal aspects of prophecy. This comes up a lot in Yirmiyahu, because like, when can you determine a real prophecy and what that means for court cases at the time? The role of prophets in politics. Just a second. I'm going to ask everyone, please mute yourselves so that we don't get any background noise. Okay. Thanks. We're going to talk about symbolic actions in prophecy, how different prophets use symbolic actions, or what the role of, so for example, when Yirmiyahu has a loincloth, right? God says, take your loincloth, wear the loincloth, and then put it into a cliff by the water and let it rot there. He's like, and now put the loincloth on. And Yirmiyahu is like, I can't, what do you mean? I can't wear it. It's no good. It's all full of holes. I can't wear this loincloth. And God's like, yeah, that's Jerusalem. In other words, Jerusalem, I did live in Jerusalem, but now it's like a rotten loincloth. I can't wear it anymore. It's no good to me because they're rotten, right? A lot of Yirmiyahu's symbolic actions are providing kind of a God's view of things. It's like, this is what it's like to be me, God. Right? I'm going to show you, step into my shoes, and you'll understand better how I see Jerusalem, for example, right? Whereas Yechezkel, when he does symbolic actions, they're actions which seem to actually be either doing something or making things very, very concrete for his listeners, right? Like he has to eat poo, right? From cows, okay? And that's to show this is what's going to happen during the siege, right? Because people are just going to be starving. And he's like, I really don't want to do this, right? He really doesn't want to do this. I mean, what he really doesn't want to do is he doesn't want to eat treif poo, is what bothered Yechezkel. And God's like, no problem. You can eat cow poo. It's fine. And so he does. And this is meant to represent what's going to happen to the people under the siege of Jerusalem, right? He has a thing where he's lying on one side for a certain number of days. He's lying on another side for a certain number of days, representing what leads up to the destruction of Israel and of Yehuda. And it seems like this is somehow connected to actually what's going on. I also would like to point out that, as we find out later, Yechezkel has a wife, which explains why he could spend so much time just lying on his side. You're like, how did he do that? And the answer is he was married. So, you know, you do feel for her. And also we're going to be talking about the end of prophecy. Why and what changes so that prophecy can no longer be essentially continue. Prophecy just can't continue anymore in a legitimate way. So what causes that change, and how do we see it in different books of the beginning of the Second Temple period of Shivat Zion? Because that's really when this happens. And it doesn't happen now. traditionally, it ends with Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Those are the last prophets, right? And then afterwards, there's still this idea in general, not so much afterwards, but there's also an idea of Ruach HaKodesh, right? The Holy Spirit, the holy inspiration that is provided to certain books, right? Like Daniel, like Esther, right? Esther, all in general, the Megillot, Eov, etc., and that are outside of prophecy, but still have some kind of inspiration. And we're going to see that there is this idea of kind of people are doing things that you could have called prophecy, but they will not call it prophecy because prophecy is no longer legitimate. And we're going to look at what changes to make prophecy so illegitimate, and also places where it says straight out, like that's it, like it's not legitimate anymore. Now, again, if we look historically, and that's one of the things we're going to do, we're going to look at, for example, in the time of Nehemiah is functioning in the time of Artaxerxes, which is quite late, and he has a confrontation with a prophet, and he calls him a prophet. He doesn't seem to not consider him a prophet, but he also doesn't trust him, right? He doesn't believe what he says. And that's really the key. When people simply don't trust prophets and they take their word as if it was anyone's word, pretty much, that's a problem. And it's interesting that it doesn't happen earlier. So let's start. I'm going to pause now to take any questions that anyone has. I did that, I see, kind of quickly. So any questions about anything I've said so far? I hear no questions. I see no questions. Let's see, any questions? Nope, no questions. Okay, so I will move right along. Let's take a look, as I promised, let's take a look at, our first prophet Moshe. Now, I want to say something about him, about our first prophet Moshe, okay? Some people, this is actually what I was just about to say. So Aliza was asking, are angels or messengers like to Abraham considered prophets? No, angels are angels. Angels are not considered prophets because they're not human beings. Even if you consider them, like, that's why we see them as angels, right? Because it says people, right? They've got to be angels. They're coming from God. They're giving a message to him. They're not called prophets. We would call anyone who's called an Ish Elohim would be a prophet, right? I'm not making that distinction. Like, I'm not saying, oh, there's some major difference between a Navi and an Ish Elohim, and I think they're just the same names, the same person, same type of person. But I do want to note that there's this tendency in much later kind of rabbinic literature sometimes to call people prophets. I don't know. I actually didn't get a chance to look at when this starts, calling different important biblical figures prophets. They're not prophets, okay? I wonder if in certain places, this is what I'm saying now is based on nothing, I have to say, okay? But I wonder if, like, in the Muslim tradition, so they just change all these big people essentially into prophets before Muhammad, right? So you have Adam as a prophet and Jesus is a prophet, and going up to more. I believe so. I believe they're considered prophets, but Muhammad's the last one, right? So I wonder if there's some kind of influence there saying, oh, well, we also think people are important, these people are important, or not, I don't know, but that's not the way it is in the Torah, right? The Torah, these guys are not prophets. They're not prophets, they're not considered prophets. You can say, but they have encounters with God, which is interesting because they aren't called prophets. And part of the reason is because they're not telling other people, right? They have personal revelations, right? And that's something that's interesting. It reminds me of what Moshe Greenfield said about prayer, that prayer, biblical prayer, I'm not talking about things like Tehillim, like Psalms. I'm not talking about liturgical prayer that's written to be prayer. I'm talking about spontaneous prayer within a narrative. When someone prays within a narrative, they are using their own words. And so, for example, when Yaakov prays, he's kind of a little bit, he's making a deal with God. And when Shimshon prays, he just says he's very, very blunt and simple, because that's the sort of guy he is. And people use their own words. And what Moshe Greenfield wanted to say was that the idea is that everyone who's a member of Israel has kind of a direct line to God. Anyone can turn to God and say, God, please help me, I am in distress, right? Or please help me, I need your help, right? And they can use their own words, and they're all connected. They don't have to go through a priest. They don't have to go through, they don't have to go through anyone. They can just kind of reach out directly to God. Whether you accept it or not, there is this idea, certainly for the forefathers, that they have kind of a direct line to God, that God will appear to them in a dream usually, but not necessarily, right? And he will talk to them, right? And tell them and promise them things, and they have a relationship with God. But that relationship with God is not a prophetic relationship. They're not meant to pass on God's message to someone else. Right? They're not meant to pass it yet, which, for example, and even Joseph is an interpreter of dreams, right? He interprets. So he does have this kind of connection, and he's using it to pass on a message, but it's mainly through dream interpretation, which would have been something that you would do in Egypt. Okay, so let's dive into Devarim. I know that people like me to share my screen when I do this, so I will do that. Let me see, is there another question here? Oh, no, just Elisa's, okay. Let me share my screen in just a moment. Let me find the right one. Here we are. Share. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so I have here we are. So I have it here in Hebrew and in English for you. Okay. Okay. Ki ata ba'al haaretz, when you come to the land, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, lo tilmad lasot ketoavot hagoyim hahem. Right, which the Lord your God gives to you, you will not learn to do like the abominations of all those nations who are in the land. Lo yimatzeh b'cha ma'avir beno uvito ba'esh, kosem ksamim, mo'onen, umenachesh, umechashef. There should not be among you someone who passes his son or his daughter in fire, or someone who does different kinds of sorceries or divination. Right, it names several, which we're clearly meant to understand what each one is, right? V'chover chaver, or doing some kind of charms. V'shoel over yodoni, or consults over a yodoni. V'doresh el ametim, and who consults the dead. Right, none of you should do any of that sort of thing. Ki toavat Hashem kol oseh ele, u'biglal hatoevot ha'ele Hashem Elokecha marish otam mipanecha, because anyone who does these things is an abomination to God, and it is because of these abominations that the Lord your God is essentially giving you their land. Right? In other words, they got kicked out because they did it, so don't you do it. You should be pure, right? These guys that you're getting their land, they did go to these kind of sorcerers, and they listened to the sorcerers. And you know that's not what God is going to let you do. Because no, they've got to have something. Right? We're used to having nothing, right? Except for people like who check, their sign and their astrology. I mean, the people still do things, right? But the fact is that you need something. There's an assumption here that you need to have something to do, right? To find out what's going on or what's going to happen. So God is going to give you a navi. He's going to give you a prophet. Me achecha kamoni, Moshe is speaking, right? So he's from your brethren, like me, like Moshe. The God is going to set up, right? Elav tishmun, he's the guy that you're going to listen to. And here's another reason why you need a prophet. Okay, so the first reason was because you can't go to any of these kind of sorcerers or divination guys. So you're not allowed to go to them. So you can't find out anything from them. And also, you can't get direct revelation. Why can you not get direct revelation? Because the last time that you tried to get direct revelation, you were scared to death and you said, please, 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 can't God just talk to you? And then he'll talk to me, right? That's when we get the Torah, right? So please, please, Moshe, you hear it, and then you tell us, because we can't deal with this. We can't deal with direct revelation. Remember that, right? Remember that? So that's why you're going to need a prophet. Okay. Navi Akim Lahem, and God said to me, that was what they said was good. In other words, it was right what they said, that they can't handle direct revelation. They really can't, they really shouldn't. Navi Akim Lahem Mikarev Achehem Kamocha. I am going to set up a prophet for them from among your brethren like you. And I will put my word in his mouth, and he will speak to them as all that I command him. Now note that it's got to be one of their brethren. It can't be a foreigner. Much like a king, right? It says you have to establish a king who's from one of you. You can't establish a foreign king over yourselves. It's the same thing. You can't establish a foreign prophet. And if a person doesn't listen to my words that are coming through this prophet, I'm going to hold him accountable for it. But the prophet who's going to say that he's prophesying in my name, but he's actually not, or a prophet who speaks on behalf of other gods, he's going to die. Okay. V'chitomar, and then the natural question. V'chitomar bilvavecha. If you say to yourself, how are you going to know what God said or didn't say? How are we supposed to know who's telling the truth? Right? And so the answer is Asher Yedaber Hanavi b'Shem Hashem v'lo yeh davar v'lo yavo hu davar asher lo dibro Hashem. A prophet who speaks in the name of the Lord, and that thing doesn't happen. That is the thing which God didn't speak, right? Because it didn't happen. Bizadon dibro hanavi lo tagor mimenu. The prophet then spoke falsely and falsely on purpose, and you should not be afraid of him. Don't be afraid of him and kill him, in other words. So that is this. That is the difficult situation of believing in prophets. And it's not wrong thing. Let me see if I can find it here. And of course, the idea that Moshe is a prophet like no other. I just, of course, wanted to note this. I'm reading from the very end of the Dvarim of Deuteronomy. No prophet rose any longer in Israel like Moshe, that God knew him face to face. Right? You can't expect prophets to be like Moshe, where God just talks to Moshe and Moshe tells everyone. And of course, as we know, Moshe, of course, has a special status in that only the Torah for Moshe is considered the Torah, right? I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. So that's a major point that distinguishes Moshe. And I do also want to say, and I've made this point before, it's important to note that my specialty is the Second Temple period. And in the Second Temple period, they are arguing about a lot of different basic ideas, the ideas that become very basic to Judaism later on. One of the ideas they're not arguing over is whether the Torah was given to Moshe at Sinai. They are everyone, any Jew who believes anything, believes that the Torah from Breshit to Dvarim was given to Moshe at Sinai. Okay, so you can still argue about it. I'm just telling you that Masorah-wise, right? I want to say that Masorah-wise, as soon as you have a Masorah, everyone pretty much believes that. Okay. Now I've said just a second. I've said the story more than once when I was TAing at NYU, and we were teaching, so we had a Western civilization class, and we were starting with the Bible, right? It's excerpts of the Bible. And one of the students who did not come from a Christian tradition or a Jewish tradition, he read, and the professor, in order not to scare all the kids by using the word Pentateuch, which no one was going to understand or barely be able to look up, he kept on calling it the 5 books of Moses. That's how he was doing it, to make it easier for them. And he called the 5 books of Moses. And the student came up to me and he's like, I looked through the book. Where does it say the whole thing was given to Moses? Where does it say that this whole thing was given to Moses? Did I miss it? He was sure he missed it, right? He's just like, he missed it. And I'm like, well, in the book itself, it never actually says that the entire thing from the beginning to end was given to Moses at Sinai, right? It says these laws were given to Moshe at Sinai, right? This Torah, like this, and that's how the book itself represents it. At the same time, if you come from a Jewish tradition, you should know that as long as there's a tradition, there is this tradition. So like I shouldn't say as long as there's a tradition. I'm not saying from Shivat Zion. I'm saying from the end of the Second Temple period, all the Jews agree that this is Moshe at Sinai. This is like, no, I'm not saying that there aren't Jews who also add other books that Moshe got in secret at Sinai, like Jubilees, right? Jubilees is supposed to be the secret book that Moshe got at Sinai that explains what really happened, right? But they all know that from Breshit, it was given to Moshe at Sinai. Right? Yes, I see a question. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
No, I mentioned this months ago, but I read this book by this rabbi who teaches at like in the Gush.
I'm lost. Am I losing everyone?
Hello?
Yeah, now I got you. You said a rabbi who teaches the Gush.
Yeah, and he brings different ideas. Like there's one idea, actually quite radical, that Moshe, that God gave Moshe the chukim, the laws. But as far as the narratives, God trusted Moshe. Moshe was divinely inspired, but Moshe wrote. It wasn't dictated word for word. For example, he may have taken the stories. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's much easier to understand. Unfortunately, if you want to find a source for that approach, you're going to be hard. What source does he have?
I don't remember. He brings in all these midrashim, like early midrashim. One idea is that actually the stories of Bereshit were before, and they were written down before, and Moshe sewed them together. That's the phrase they use.
Well, I'd like to see that midrash, by the way. If you could send me the midrash, I'd like to see it.
Okay.
Like a source. You don't have to send me the actual midrash. If you find the source, just send me the source. I'll look it up. I'd like to see that.
The book is called Until This Day.
It works nicely. It actually works nicely for the way I kind of see the stories of Breshit, in terms of them being very much in the context of ancient Near Eastern narratives, where there are stories that everyone knows, and then this is coming to kind of correct them with some of these stories. And since this isn't our topic right now, I'm not going to get into it, but I think very often when you look at these stories, they're correcting something that was a much wider, which is a very widely known account of things, of primordial history, but so that works nicely. At the same time, it's you're hard pressed, and Rav Mordechai Breuer used to say, everyone quotes Ibn Ezra, and Ibn Ezra has the secret of the 10, and it's 10 psukim that were really later than Moshe and were put in after but it's just those 10, right? Ibn Ezra would never have approved of the documentary hypothesis, right? Rav Mordechai Breuer says this, and I think it's true. I think it's nice to you take Ibn Ezra like, well, 10. He's talking about 10 verses. He's talking about 10 psukim. So I see that Yehuda has sent a link, which I don't want to just take out of time, but Yehuda, if you want to explain what the link is that you shared, because I don't want to take the time out of class for me to figure it out. I guess not. So I'll let everyone click through and they can tell me.
If I could just interject something.
Sure, go ahead.
There is a Gemara that says that about the Ferush, that says that about Sefer Dvarim.
Yeah.
That Sefer Dvarim, that all the rest of the Torah was mipi Gvura, but Dvarim Moshe Amar mipi Atzmo.
Well, that's easy to say because the whole thing's a speech from Moshe.
Yeah.
Right. So that is, and that, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned how often I've mentioned this, but frequently the Septuagint names, which are the English names of the books, are from the Septuagint. The Septuagint names of the books seem to actually reflect the early Jewish names of the books. So Deuteronomy is the second law, right? Mishnah Torah, right? That's the name for Dvarim. It's the second law. Mishnah Torah, it's a repeat, rather. Not the second law, but a repeat of the law, because it's Moshe re-saying it, right? Oh, okay. So Yehuda Zirkin, just the link that he sent which has the source that you were talking about from Rav Amnon Bazak. So I will look at that. Thank you, Yehuda.
It's
okay,
it's a fantastic book.
So I will absolutely look at it.
It's in English and Hebrew.
Cool. So it's for anyone who doesn't see the notes, it's this very day fundamental questions. Is that what it is? So where were we? All right, we're on Moshe. So Moshe has a special status of being a great prophet who no one can ever come close to. And the way he functions is different from other prophets because he can really argue with God in a way that most prophets can't. He's kind of the transition, if you would, kind of like, I'm a little bit like from this idea of the Avot, the forefathers who are just talking to God, like, they have this kind of relationship where if God appears to them, they're not like, oh no, I'm gonna die, right? And this transition to a prophet who takes this message and says, this is my job now. I get God's message and I give it to other people, right? But Moshe is super, super close to God in a way that we're not supposed to expect afterwards. Okay, now what we saw was this setup where, how do you know whether to trust a prophet? Well, if what he says comes true, then he's a good prophet, and if what he says doesn't come true, then he is a liar. Right now, we can already see there was a classic problem with this, and that classic problem is dealt with much later explicitly by Yirmiyahu. Let me make sure that I've got the right source here. And of course I do not. So I'm just going to say it by heart. Yirmiyahu is confronted by a prophet who is predicting that remember, let's go to the timeline actually and talk a little bit about where Yirmiyahu is as a prophet. Excuse me. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right. So if we look at this timeline for the prophetic books, we have, we're going to, in this class, we're really going to be kind of period skipping a lot, right? So we have in Amos and Hosea our earliest book prophets, right? And they are functioning in the time of Uzziah. This is really very early on. Amos is probably functioning before the real rise of Assyria, before they get really threatening, and Hosea is already watching Assyria be a threat to Israel. And then we have Micah and Yeshayahu, who are prophesying towards the Assyrian exile of Israel. Then we have During this period, it's a question, is this Nahum? When is Nahum speaking exactly? When is Habakkuk prophesying exactly? However, it seems that Habakkuk is prophesying before the rise of Babylonia or during the rise of Babylonia. Nahum, of course, is reacting to the Assyrian exile and what Assyria did. Then we get to the time of Yoshio, we have Tzvanya, we have Yirmiyahu. Now, Yirmiyahu is happening during and before and during the exiles, the rebellion against Babylonia. Just a second, I'm going to come back to that in a second. Of course, around the time that Yirmiyahu, towards the end of Yirmiyahu's time as a prophet, you have Yechezkel, Ezekiel, who is prophesying to the group that got initially exiled, right? So we have the exile of Yoachim, and then we have the final exiles. The exile of Yoachim, that's when Yechezkel starts prophesying in Bavel, and then Yirmiyahu is prophesying at that time in Yehuda at the time of Tzidkiyahu. Tzidkiyahu was the puppet king that's been set up by Babylonia. Some of you have heard me talk about the different stages that both Assyria and Babylonia used with their vassal states. Actually, let me come back. I'll just finish with the timeline. When Cyrus conquers Babylonia, they return to Zion. We have Haggai, Zechariah, and later, we don't know exactly when, Malachi. We don't know exactly when Yoel and Ovadia prophesied. We'll probably talk about that later. So if we talk about a little bit about when was Yirmiyahu prophesying, a lot of his prophecies that we're more familiar with is in the time of Tzidkiyahu. Tzidkiyahu set up as a puppet king. In general, these stages of exile, of conquering an exile. For Assyria and Babylonia, it wasn't just in Jerusalem. Ashdod went through the different places, went through the different stages. First stage is a vassal state, right? Taxes go to us, right? You have independence, but you've got to send us money, maybe people, right? It can get increasingly onerous, but hey, we let you live, okay? That's a vassal state. If they rebel against being a vassal state, you go in and you set up a puppet king, right? You're like, okay, you have independence, right? But your ruler owes us. We set up your ruler. We got rid of your old ruler. We have the power to do that, and we set up a puppet king who's your guy, but he's our guy too, right? That's Tzidkiyahu, right? Tzidkiyahu is from the royal family. He's the uncle. Yoachim, there's the exile of Yoachim, and they set up Tzidkiyahu. If you rebel again, that's when you get total exile. That's when you're destroyed. You're done now. Okay, so that's what's going on in the time of Yirmiyahu. For most of the key parts that we remember is him begging Tzidkiyahu not to rebel against Babylonia. Right? There's a general idea that A, we are going to throw off this yoke of Babylonia, and B, that Jerusalem cannot be destroyed. Why can Jerusalem not be destroyed? Because it wasn't destroyed during the Assyrian exile. Now, the Assyrian exile, you would say, but the Assyrian exile was in Israel. The Assyrian exile was in Israel, and there was devastation throughout Judea, right? And only Jerusalem was left. And what Jerusalemites said to themselves was, why are we left? Because God lives here, and God will never let his house be destroyed. He lives in Jerusalem. Nothing's going to happen to Jerusalem like ever, right? And a lot of Yirmiyahu's work is to argue against that idea. So, so what happens? So there are all sorts of false prophets who are saying, yes, we should rebel against Babylonia. Babylonia is going to fall, da, 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 da. And this guy comes, and meanwhile, Yirmiyahu, we talked about symbolic actions, Yirmiyahu is walking around with a yoke around his neck. And this other prophet goes around and he breaks the yoke off. He breaks the yoke off Yirmiyahu's neck, and he says, and so we will throw off the yoke of Babylonia. And Yirmiyahu is like, well, I certainly hope so. That would be nice. But don't you know the rule? He says, listen, I just want you to know the rule is that if you say a good thing and if you say a bad thing and it doesn't happen, that just means God's changed his mind or the people did repented. Right? If you say a good thing and it doesn't happen, then you're a false prophet, right? that's a reason to be a doomsday prophet, by the way. You're always set, like you never have a problem. And Yirmiyahu's kind of warning the other guy. He's like, look, I hope you're telling the truth here, but you should know that if you're lying, you're in trouble, right? My stuff doesn't come true. It just means that God may change his mind. Your stuff doesn't come true and you're a false prophet. This is the first time we're hearing that explicitly. And realize how late Yirmiyahu is in the line of prophets, right? He's getting really close to the end there, but this is the first time that we hear this rule that if someone says a good thing and if someone says a bad thing and it doesn't happen, it's fine. Someone says a good thing, it doesn't happen, that makes them a false prophet. And this is an issue. Look, it's at the center of the book of Yonah. Now, the book of Yonah is hard to date. It's hard to date, even though Yonah as a character, we find in Melachim, but the question is the book from then? There's a whole big question. And so with the whole central idea of Yonah, right, is that Yonah doesn't want to be put in a situation where he's going to say a prophecy to people and then it doesn't come true because God's merciful. Well, swell, I just told them this was going to happen. Right? He doesn't even give them a choice. He doesn't say unless you repent. He says, right? 40 days and Nineveh is destroyed. Right? That's what he says. And then it doesn't happen. Right? He camps out outside the city. Why is Yonah camping outside the city? Because he wants to see if it's destroyed or not. And of course it's not, because they all repented. And then he's angry. Right? So this is a problem, right? This is an issue. This is a prophecy that doesn't come true. And how is the prophet going to deal with that? This is an issue. So this is something that we only understand explicitly when we get to Yirmiyahu, right? Before that, there's a kind of an idea, there seems to be a kind of understanding of let's wait, let's see, maybe this prophet's telling the truth, right? Now there are clashes with the royals, right? There are clashes with the establishment, right? But, and we'll see when we get to it, that in fact the people seem to agree with Yirmiyahu in that, because they can point to a precedent. The precedent is Micha. Micha says Jerusalem's going to be destroyed and it's not destroyed. And they're like, Micha wasn't the false prophet. So clearly Yirmiyahu also can't be killed for saying that because it won't happen, right? But that doesn't make him a false prophet. Anyway, so we have these ideas of this problem of how do you know when a prophet is lying or not? Okay, so I see a very long comment. Someone was just asking me about this. So going back to the comment before about how there's a midrash that Moshe stitched, that Breshit was before Moshe. So I'll read the English in the comment that was sent. Increase the workload upon the men. Shmot 5:9. This teaches that they possess texts which they would read every Shabbat, in which it was written that the Holy One, blessed be He, would redeem Israel. Because they rested on Shabbat, power decreed, increase the word load upon the men, that they may labor in it and not pay heed to vain words. Let them not relax and let them not rest on Shabbat. So the idea is that they already had something to learn. Shmot Rabbah, okay. Shmot Rabbah is fine. I have no problem with Shmot Rabbah. It is the latest of the rabbis, right? And you can see from the way it's structured, because it actually has some very pretty complicated structures. Like it's actually nice to see how it stitches things together. It's kind of close to sermons almost. And it has the classic ptichta where it brings something from Ketuvim. And it's like, and now we're going to connect it to the parsha. And it does it in cute ways. But it's interesting to see when I don't want to go too far off track, but please, everyone who wants to learn this on their own, please copy the comments that Yehuda posted. Thank you, Yehuda. And I will certainly also take a look. Okay, so to continue, so let's look at, for example, an earlier example, or actually it depends how you date everything. Like I have to say that academically, so for example, academically, there's this idea that Malachim Aleph and Malachim Bet Kings has a Deuteronomic editing, right? Which you would kind of understand because there's this idea because that it goes together with Dvarim, right? And there are people who argue with it and stuff like that. And the idea is there's let me share, but we're going to take this as more or less from its time. It doesn't really matter that much, frankly. Let me go to, here we are. Is this where I wanted to go? Yes. Okay, here is a story where a real jerk does a really nasty thing. Okay, we start with a guy who is a man of God. He's a prophet, right? I'm gonna kind of summarize as we go. So he goes to Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat, of course, Jeroboam, right? But Yeravam ben Nevat has started the worship outside of Jerusalem, and he's worshiping in Bethel. And he has been sent, and he says to him, Yoshiyahu is going to come out of the house of David, and he is going to sacrifice these priests of the high places. He's going to burn their bones on these altars. And he's like, and this is important, and on that day he gave a sign saying, Zeha Mofet Asher Diber Hashem. This is the sign that God spoke. Note how he's proving that he's a prophet. Okay, he needs a sign because people don't know, right? So what's the sign? Right? The altar is going to be ripped, and the ashes are going to be spilled. That the ashes that are on are going to be spilled. Okay, and in fact, that is what happened. And not only that, Yeravam tries to grab him. It's not clear if Yeravam tries to grab him or someone else is trying to grab him. Could be, and his hand dries up, right? And he can't pull it back. And so this prophet is proven he is a prophet, right? And the king says, okay, so pray for me. And he prays for him, and he gets his hand back. Oh, it was the king. Sorry, it was the king's hand. And the king says to him, he says, "Well, come home, and I'll come home and eat, and I'll give you like a present, a kind of a reward." And he says to the king, "No way, because God told me you can't eat bread or drink water until you go home, essentially, and you can't come back the same way you came." Now, why you can understand why he would get this thing not to eat bread or drink water, because the whole point is you're not going to ally yourself with Yeravam ben Nevat. In other words, why is Yeravam inviting him home? He's like, "Come be my prophet." No. You are not going to eat any of this guy's food. You're going to come right back, right? Now, why he would not be able to go the same way, it's not clear. So he goes another way, and he doesn't return the same way that he got to Bethel. And there's this old prophet, a Navi, and he's called a prophet, and he's dwelling in Bethel, right? And his son comes, and he tells him everything that happened. And so he says, "Which way did he go?" And they said, "Oh, that's the way he goes." So he goes, and he chases him down, right? He chases him down, and he says, was that you?" And he says, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, then come home with me and eat." And he says, "No, I can't come with you because God said you can't eat or drink in this place." And so the prophet says to him, "I'm also a prophet. And an angel said to me, a malach, an angel said to me, bring him back and give him bread and water." Okay, it says, "Kikeshlo," you lied to him, right? Just in case we weren't clear. It just has to let us know, because we don't know. We're reading it. We're like, oh, maybe that's what happened. It says, no, he was lying. So he goes back with him. He eats bread. He drinks water, and God speaks to the prophet, right? And essentially has a prophecy against the man of God, right? Who's also a prophet. Right? Saying, because you rebelled against the word of God, you are going to die. Okay? You are not going to be buried with your forefathers. You're going to die without being able to get there, right? And that must have been a really awkward end to the meal. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the end of that meal and they're just going to stare at each other because he keeps eating. He keeps eating and drinking. It says after he finished eating and drinking, well, I mean, I guess you're already going to die. You might as well eat and drink. So after he ate and drank, he saddles his donkey and he goes, and a lion attacks him and eats him or kills him, right? And it was still miraculous because the lion and the donkey guarded his body. Okay. And they told that prophet, the prophet who got him killed, right? So they tell the prophet, oh, this guy died. He was killed by a lion. And he says, and the prophet says, Vaishmana, being the prophet hears, Asher Hashivo min haderech, right? Who brought him, that brought him back from the way. They said, and he said, oh, he's that man of God who rebelled against the word of God, and God gave him to the lion, and he broke him and he killed him, just as the word of God said. And he tells his sons again, saddle my donkey, and he goes off and he takes the body, and he buries him. Essentially, he buries him in Bethel. He buries him in where he lives in Bethel. And after he buries him, he says, you guys, he tells his sons, when I die, bury me with him, because this thing is going to happen. This thing is going to happen in the future, that in fact all these temples are going to be destroyed, and the priests are going to be destroyed on it. Essentially, the point is that he wants to be buried with him, because at that time all of these graves are going to be desecrated. I don't want my grave to be desecrated, so bury me with this guy. And you understand that because, in fact, that's exactly what happens at the end of the book, right? At the end of Melachim, Yoshiyahu is like, he's busy like just destroying everything, and he's like, who's buried there? And they're like, oh, that's the man of God who said that this was going to happen. And he's like, oh, okay, so leave that alone. And he leaves him alone, and this jerky prophet who got him killed. He does. He's left alone. He never gets punished. Like this is like nothing happens to him, right? And this is the classic thing of, how do you know who's telling the truth, right? Here's this prophet, he got this prophecy from God, and then this other prophet saying, hey, I also got a prophecy from God, and he said you could eat and drink with me, right? Now, you could have said, well, he should have been suspicious, What exactly the first prophet was thinking is not super clear. Actually, Josephus talks about this, and he says it's because he wanted to get rid of a rival. Here this guy was going to be on the rise, and he just wanted to kind of get rid of him. But it's a terrible thing, right? And we see here the difficulty in knowing who to trust. Here's a prophet, and he doesn't know who to trust, right? And yet prophecy continues. Prophecy is strong. It continues in really in all its strength through after the first exile, right? But we can understand why it would be difficult. The fact that what's amazing is that it is maintained, and also that you have these prophets, again, prophets speaking against the grain, and they are recorded, right? And then when they come true, when what they say is going to happen, when it comes true, people are like, oh wow, and they keep the books. Right? When we talk about how do we have Hosea and Amos, and I've said this before, right? Amos, there's a question, and because there are some people who say, well, Amos was actually from Yehuda, and so it was back in Yehuda, so Yehuda kept it. But again, if we talk about where are our books from, people forget about this, but Tanakh, when we say Tanakh, right? Torah, where the whole collection is essentially a Judean collection, right? It's a collection of the books written in Yehuda, right? For the most part. I'm not talking about Torah now. I'm talking about if we go on, right? Where are these from? Because if you look, say, from Melachim, right? The book of Kings, right? It continues after there's no more Yisrael. It keeps going, right? So there's someone who's recording it in Yisrael, right? Those books somehow got to the final version, okay? But it kept on being continued. The final, version of Kings of Melachim had to come from Yehuda because there is no more Yisrael. How do we get Hosea and Amos? Hosea and Amos are prophesying in the north, and then the north is destroyed, it's exiled, right? How did we get those books? You can argue about Amos, and Amos was from Yehuda, Hosea it's absolutely a Yisrael, it's an Israelite, your northern kingdom book. How did it survive? And the answer is someone thought it was important enough to bring it down. They ran. There were absolutely exiles from the northern kingdom who made it down to the southern kingdom. And there were exiles who thought it was important enough to keep. And they shared it and was like, yeah, that's prophecy, boy. And they kept it. I mean, it's amazing. And then again, we have books that are so widely respected that even if you have a prophecy that does not come true in it, right? You have a prophecy in Yechezkel, and it doesn't come true. And we know it didn't come true because Yechezkel tells us it didn't come true. And you're like, wait, what? Because, hey, it's people know, there's certain prophet that you just say, okay, this guy's a prophet. That prophecy didn't come true. We don't understand it. Who knows? Right? It's like Yirmiyahu says, and did you bring sacrifices to me in the desert? And the answer, you're supposed to be like, well, no, because he's talking about how sacrifices are not that important. But we know that yes, right? But yes, we did bring sacrifices. What do you mean we didn't bring? Like, Yirmiyahu is saying, if the answer is supposed to be like, it's a rhetorical question. Like, you didn't bring sacrifice in the desert, they're not that important. Yes, we did. And when do we read that Haftarah? On a parsha where we're talking about the sacrifices we brought in the desert, right? That's my favorite thing. When Chazal say, deal with it, right? Not even Chazal, later on. They're like, here it is, deal with it. We have a parsha talking about bringing sacrifice in the desert, and Yirmiyahu is like, did you bring sacrifices in the desert? Hey, deal with it. We've always been dealing with it. We've been dealing with it since we had the book, right? So we're going to be talking about that more as we continue in terms of the contradictions that we have in prophecy itself, just the fact that there is prophecy, and who do you trust? So that's another thing that we're going to be talking about as we continue, and how it manages to last so long before the end of what we call the end of prophecy, which actually seems to be like the real end of prophecy, in other words, where everyone was like, no, there are no more prophets, is much later, I think, than we normally think it is. So I've come to the end of my time, but I am going to take a look at some comments, and anyone who wants to ask questions, please do just give me a moment. From what we know about the zoology of Eretz Yisrael, it appears bears and lions were exceedingly rare, and having people eaten by them rarer still. So when the Bible invokes lions and bears, it appears it's signifying divine intervention. Yes, indeed. And in fact, this was a trope in particular in Yisrael. This is why, and around Beitel, lions killing people as a divine intervention is connected to Beitel, not only in Israel, but in Assyrian lore. There's a god, Beit Elu, and he sends lions, right? So there's a connection between an idea in the northern kingdom in particular, in Yisrael. Remember, this story is happening in Yisrael. It's happening in the northern kingdom. It's happening in Beitel. That in the north, lions killing people means divine intervention. That's a way of divine punishment. So good point, and it connects to other things.
And of course, there's the story of Elisha and the bears, and the Talmudic.
Interpretation of that is that's one of my favorite cases of a change in the meaning of a phrase. And actually, I do want to talk about that at some point in prophecy, how the meaning of that phrase changes. It's supposed to change in the book itself. We'll talk about that later. But you guys know the story about Elisha, and he calls the bears, and the bears kill from a forest, and they both kill the kids. And Chazal, right, in the Talmud, they have an argument. What was miraculous? Did the forest exist and he called forth the bears? Did the forest not exist? And they say lo dubim. There's one answer is lo dubim v'lo ya'ar. There was no bears and there was no forest. The whole thing was miraculous. But in modern Hebrew, lo dubim v'lo ya'ar means it didn't happen. right? There wasn't the jars, there weren't bears, it didn't happen, right? So I love how the worldview shift has completely changed the meaning of the phrase, right? From it all was all miraculous to it clearly didn't happen. So, and on that note, I hope you enjoyed this introduction. As you can hear, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys further. So have a good night, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.